The House the House Local Government and Municipal Finance Committee will come to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chair Fitzgerald.
Here.
Representatives Burns.
Here.
Shannon.
Present.
Breen.
Present.
Rogers.
Yes.
Hill.
Here.
Hoskins.
Here.
Pies. Zorn.
Here.
Paquette.
I'm here.
Bizat. Begol.
Here.
Preston.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 11 members. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. I need a motion to adopt the minutes from our previous meeting, March 6, 2024. That motion is made by Representative Hoskins. Seeing no objection, the minutes will stand approved. This morning, we are taking up House Bills 5437 through 5446. Today, we will be taking testimony on these bills only. I do expect that this will take at least 2 committee hearings for testimony to have this heard in its entirety. We have a number of persons who have joined from near and far, and we appreciate you being here today to join or to bring your voice forward. But first, we do have an H1 substitute to adopt for House Bill 5438. I need a motion to adopt the H1 substitute. Representative Rogers makes that motion. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Representatives Burns.
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
Breen.
Aye.
Rogers.
Yes.
Hill.
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Pies. Zorn.
Yes.
Paquette.
Yes.
Bizat. Begol.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 10 yeas. Substitute is adopted.
Thank you. Next, we have an H2 substitute for House Bill 5443. I need a motion to adopt. That motion is made by Representative Burns. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chair Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Representatives Burns.
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
Breen.
Aye.
Rogers.
Yes.
Hill.
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Pies. Zorn.
Yes.
Paquette.
Yes.
Bizat. Begol.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, substitute H2 is adopted.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. So again, we have several people testifying today. We are going to do so in a manner that following the sponsors, all those who are here to testify will be given 4 minutes to testify. At 45 seconds left in your testimony, my policy member will hold up this green notebook. It's the most colorful thing we have up here to denote 45 seconds remaining and a good time for you to wrap up. I will be announcing persons to come forward and also the person who will be following them so that you are prompt and ready to come forward following testimony by the group before you. So with that, I'd like to welcome Representative Andrews and Representative Hill to provide testimony and opening statements regarding this legislation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If pleases the chair, I just wanted to give a couple of notes on the substitute so everybody's aware of some of the little changes, and then I'll go into the testimony on the bill. So just as a couple of notes, we added an effective period of 6 months to the bill to give time for the platform to be created and for local units of government to prepare for some of the changes that would come with the bills, as well as the short-term rental owners. Mostly technical changes around some wording in some areas of the bills around how local units of government are referred to, and some small changes on the smoke detector and carbon monoxide detector language that aligns more closely with the existing bed and breakfast requirements. The main changes that were in the substitute, and then the McFall bill, there was a conflict sub was the substitute there. So just so everybody's aware of what was in that. With that said, very happy to be here today with this legislation. My district, as many of you know, runs about 110 miles of coastline from Saugatuck down to New Buffalo, and includes many communities where the short-term rental issue is one of, if not the top issue for a lot of the residents who live in these communities, where tourism is a big part of the year-round economy. What we've seen over the years is that as the local governments have been grappling with this, they've struggled with being able to properly zone and regulate these, and they've struggled with funding and enforcement that has come along with the short-term rental industry. So what our legislation seeks to do is really enshrine the local control with the local governments over the short-term rentals, make sure that each community is able to do what's best for itself. You'll find for Saugatuck and St. Joe and communities like that, the needs of regulating these are a little bit different than maybe Ann Arbor or East Lansing, where the short-term rental activity revolves around football games and athletics a lot more than it does around summer beach season, which is also different than what you might see in parts of the UP where the seasons are different than what we have in our neck of the woods. So giving a lot of control to local governments over that. There's a creation of a statewide registry platform in the legislation. This is something that states like Colorado and Rhode Island have instituted, and other states on local levels have done this as well. And essentially what this does is requires the platforms and the short-term rental owners to register their properties with the platform. It requires them to have a registered agent within a 30-mile radius of the platform, so there's always an emergency contact to be reached out to. Has phone numbers and email addresses, so again, if there's an emergency, there's somebody to be reached, which can be a problem right now when you have out-of-state owners who aren't necessarily available when there's an emergency at their property. It also gives the local units of government the ability to check against the registry. So when they're trying to figure out, if police get called to a noise complaint, sometimes it can be difficult to figure out, is this a licensed short-term rental or is this, happening out of pocket? Registry gives an easy way for them to check that, and then also to enforce if there's zoning violations and a license needs to be revoked. Right now, many of the communities that have some sort of registry and licensing process operate these at a loss because our tax code doesn't allow local units of government to profit off of licensing. So if at any point they start profiting off of licensing, they open themselves up to lawsuits because they're profiting off of a licensing activity. So a lot of them intentionally operate their current licensing system at a loss to avoid that potential lawsuit. On top of that, the tourist activity that comes through our communities, City of St. Joe estimates that 650,000 people a year go down to Silver Beach, and those are the ones that they record via parking. So you can imagine it's closer to about 1 million tourists that come through the City of St. Joe. Saugatuck and New Buffalo will give you similar estimates of north of 1 million tourists that come through communities of less than 5,000 people in Saugatuck and New Buffalo's case, 7,500 in St. Joe's case. And they have no method of which to recover for the additional burden that tourism puts on their community. Obviously, tourism is great for our local businesses. We have a lot of restaurants and shops that exist because of the tourism, but because the Michigan's tax code forbids local sales and use taxes from being levied, our local governments have no method by which to capture some of that tourism activity for necessary services. So in a lot of our communities, the roads are extra bad. We have a lot more issues with pipes because of the extra burden of water that tourism puts on our communities, and particularly public safety, where down at the beach every year you have emergency police calls where you have police officers that have to figure out how to get down to the beach, how to find the conflict in a crowd of several thousand people, and when they're down there trying to figure that out, they're not up in the city policing the rest of the community. Same goes for fire, EMT, that sort of thing. So the creation of a 6% excise tax in this legislation is representative of our communities needing some ability to recover from this tourism activity and reinvest in our communities. For a lot of our communities, this is going to be money that's going to go into infrastructure and public safety, I think, by and large. We left it as general fund dollars because every community has a different need. You'll hear from some of our local governments today who have come up to testify, and they'll probably each share with you a different burden that they're experiencing that they need help filling in. And I think it's also important to recognize that a lot of the conflict in our communities around this issue comes from the conflict of permanent residents versus tourists. As somebody who lives in one of these communities, the peak season's a hard time to, live around the beach. There's just, you can't get a seat in a restaurant. It's hard to find parking. And then on top of that, when you go to your city council meetings and you're complaining about roads needing to be fixed, there's never enough money. And that part of the reason the roads are bad is because of all the tourism. So we think that, talking to our local governments, having this revenue generating ability is going to help ease some of those tensions and help demonstrate some of the value of tourism to people who, live year round in our communities. And it's important that we do this because this issue is paralyzing for a lot of our city councils. You can't hardly go to a meeting in South Haven or Saugatuck and oftentimes in New Buffalo without this being an issue on the table from residents in some form or fashion. So a lot of ramifications that sort of stem from what's happening here. And the final thing I want to point out is what we're really trying to do is give our local governments the ability to zone properly the activity that's happening and track it correctly. And that, I think, is the most important part of this, because if you live in a residential neighborhood and you're surrounded by short-term rentals, it's not something that's going to keep you necessarily wanting to live in the community you're in. It raises housing prices, makes it hard for people to afford housing in a lot of these communities, which means our seasonal workers who are necessary for serving our tourism industry don't necessarily have the ability to live in the communities they're working in anymore. And as those folks have less and less ability to live in our communities, we're seeing our restaurants and businesses become increasingly seasonal, which then increasingly makes it a less desirable place for permanent residents to live. And as a state, as we're trying to think about attraction and population growth and that sort of thing, and the housing crisis that we're already experiencing, houses in residential neighborhoods leaving the market to turn into short-term rentals. Those are, not houses that are then being used by permanent residents of the state, and it's a slow attrition. And as any of you, I think all of you have sat on local government know, as you lose population, you lose tax dollars, and it increasingly makes it difficult to sustain your city, your township. So I think this fix it also bans bans. I want to make that clear. You cannot ban short-term rentals under this act. You can zone them, you can regulate them. We were seeking to find a good compromise here that lets our local governments function, allows the tourism activity to continue, lets short-term rentals continue to exist in properly zoned places, and ideally takes a lot of the tension out of this argument. Now I'll let Jen speak to her bill.
Thank you. And again, Representative Jen Hill from Central Upper Peninsula, House District 109. And this is the issues that my colleague has raised regarding the impact to our local services and local government, the impact to our lands and our waters, particularly lake homes, and the pressure that we have on keeping those pristine lakes clean when you have this concentrated use. It's a great concern. I'm today serving to bring the voice of many parts of the Upper Peninsula, which are also seeing these concerns of the lack of housing, the increase of housing, the inability for people who have jobs or have 3 jobs, because often you have to have 3 jobs to stay in the Upper Peninsula with the different kinds of seasonal work available. People are making it work, but as the housing prices have gone up and up, the ability to get started with your life in the Upper Peninsula is unfortunately withering away, and that's a real concern. I have spoken, the city of Marquette went through I was a former city commissioner in City Marquette, and even before I took office in 2018, we went through an 18-month process to determine what zoning we wanted for short-term rentals. We have a plan. We cap it at 250, and we have it on a geographic basis that there's some distribution of them throughout the community. That has been working for us. This proposed bill would allow that flexibility to continue. But I do want to note one of the arguments that's made about these is that people are renting out their homes in order to be able to keep them and live in the community where they want to live. Of the 250 rentals that we allow as short-term rentals in Marquette, 5 of them are owner-occupied. It's not a case that the majority of them at all are ones that people are living in and renting out a room in order to pay the mortgage. These are income-generating properties. And I've also, our Convention and Visitors Bureaus are very concerned, are interested in the regulation. There's different perspectives from different CVBs, but I'd say by and large, very interested in seeking support on the statewide registry and what that would bring. I also have comments from the City of Marquette passed a resolution in favor of this bill, and I believe other communities have as well. And let me just find the comment from, there's a Greater Munising Partnership, which includes just about everybody in that community. Munising is a community of 2,000 people that has a paper mill. I mean, we have industry there, and but also we have the 1 million tourists a year who come to Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, and there is just nowhere for service workers to live. It's a huge concern with short-term rentals, and the ability to have local zoning and government control is very, very important to them. Now, and then finally, on my bill, I am sponsoring a bill that just says that of the funds collected, it's an opt-in program spent on housing and childcare. And to the point of that we need to make sure that we can keep workers in Michigan, that this would allow the possibility, again, on an opt-in basis, on as much as a community would consider, to put that money towards housing and childcare. And in particular, my small communities have trouble coming up often with that required 10%, 20% match to qualify for grants and other assistance. This would be a way of raising that match, using funds from people who are coming to our community and contributing, but also aren't the long-term residents who are already taxed. And so this is a way to help support them and reach these goals of increasing housing and increasing childcare.
Thank you both for being here. Appreciate your commentary on the development and the content of the bills. We are going to move on with testimony from those who have joined us today. I think that your backdrop helps to set the stage for what we're going to hear today. So thank you for joining us, and I'll begin by calling forward Helen Baldwin, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Saugatuck, and Holly Anderson of the Saugatuck City Council and Planning Commission to have their testimony. Following them will be John Humphrey, the Mayor of City of New Buffalo. And while we're having them come forward, I'd just like to start, or also additionally add, we are required to wrap our hearing today before 1:30, and so we will be concluding, if not at 1:25, just after with testimony to ensure that we are doing our due diligence to stop by that required time. So thank you for your understanding, and Mayor Pro Tem Baldwin and Member Anderson, you are set to begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Helen Baldwin.
If you can hit the red button at the end of your stalk.
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Helen Baldwin. I am the Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Saugatuck, and I also chair the Parks and Public Works Committee. Saugatuck is a special place. We have the good fortune to be located in an area filled with fantastic beaches, parks, nature trails, and waterways. It's no surprise we were hailed last week by USA Today as one of the 10 best coastal small towns in all the country. The natural beauty and green spaces that surround us make us a favorite destination for the thousands of visitors that we welcome every year. As our town swells in the summer, short-term rentals become an essential piece of our lodging capacity for overnight visitors. In some parts of our city, short-term rentals are a natural fit and seamlessly blend in with the neighboring businesses and residences. But in our low-density residential neighborhoods, short-term rental saturation has exploded to a level that is disruptive for the community and creates ongoing nuisance issues. Local governments need the ability to impose regulations to cover public safety issues and to deal with nuisances such as excessive noise and trash, parking concerns, and others. We also need the ability to use local judgment to determine which parts of the city are compatible with heavy short-term rental use and to determine what the proper density should be in our residential neighborhoods. This package of bills will protect our ability to do so. But I want to focus on the financial aspect, the impact that the proposed excise tax would have for the city. As a small town, Saugatuck unfortunately has a very limited operating budget. You might be surprised to know our annual revenues are just south of $5 million. Whenever we need funding to maintain or improve our infrastructure, it's critical we obtain grants and donations to make these projects possible. Our main source of discretionary funds we need for park improvements is the fees to park at Oval Beach, which doesn't even come close to what we need to tackle our long list of priorities. For example, we're facing a $16 million expense to tackle state-mandated lead water line replacement. We're spending a significant sum of money to treat invasive plant species in Kalamazoo Lake. We've received estimates for repairs to the decking, stairs, and bathrooms at Mount Bald Head Park that exceed $1.5 million. One of our featured parks in the city center is long overdue for public restrooms. We're in the midst of replacing the playground in our village square at a cost of several $100,000. and we're working to complete our section of a non-motorized trail that's going to run from South Haven to Holland. An excise tax on short-term rental bookings will provide a much-needed revenue source to allow the city to create, maintain, and improve the very features that tourists come to Saugatuck to enjoy. Instead of placing that burden solely on our taxpayers, the proposed bills will require a fair contribution from a large number of visitors as well. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Representative Andrews. And hello to everyone. My name is Holly Anderson, and I'm a member of the Saugatuck City Council and a member of our Planning Commission. Last year, I chaired a short-term rental task force, which was appointed by City Council to explore the issues and opportunities with short-term rentals and make recommendations to address them. I'll start by saying that short-term rentals are an important option for communities like Saugatuck, with economies heavily dependent on tourism. We need them, and they play a valuable role in our lodging mix, but they come with issues that city leaders must anticipate and address. Mayor Pro Tem Baldwin did an excellent job providing context for the significant benefits the proposed legislation offers to tackle those issues, especially the excise tax, and local control it will provide to address issues specific to each community, many of which are created by the significant influx of people each summer. This tax creates overdue parity between hotels, B&Bs, and short-term rentals as commercial lodging enterprises and helps relieve some of the burden to full-time residents. Other provisions are equally important, particularly ensuring local control.
Ms. Anderson, I apologize. Time has expired, and to remain equitable with all others who
I'm
are
sorry.
here.
It was combined.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank
Apologies.
You
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. And we always accept written testimony, which we encourage you to submit for distribution to the committee.
Will do.
Thank you so much. Next up, John Humphrey, the mayor of the city of New Buffalo, followed by Mark Florian, the Lincoln Township trustee. Mr. Chair, will there be time for any questions at all? Today, we are going to make sure that those who have traveled from a distance are able to testify in person. We know that this is sometimes challenging, as we all know, to travel to Lansing, and so we will have likely limited time today for questions, though we'll make sure that a Zoom option is available to make sure that people can have their questions answered at the second hearing or subsequent hearings. Yes, thank you. Mr. Mayor, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee for allowing me to speak here today. I am John Humphrey, the mayor of the City of New Buffalo since 2020. The City of Buffalo has prevailed in federal court 3 times now. Our rights as a municipality to manage our own communities through our zoning ordinance are protected by long-established federal case law. Our case was tried federally because its instigators were residents of another state, and we should be worried about that here in Michigan. If you talk to public officials throughout the 38th district, you will hear the same story again and again. The faces will change, but the underlying narrative will be the same. We are all under some form of duress from the long-term effects of the unrecovered costs of tourism. Tourism is a private enterprise that is a very public cost. Those costs are not remunerated. There are no use taxes, lodging taxes, or excise taxes available to the City of New Buffalo. That puts the entire burden of tourism directly on the local residents. Our municipalities are funded by property taxes. Taxable values are capped by the Headley Amendment. 60% of all local taxes leave town and go to the county or state. If you're a second homeowner, 75% of our taxes leave the town and go to county, state, or our school district. State sales tax remuneration is based on residential population. So we routinely have 15 to 20,000 people in town on a given weekend. 90% of all sales tax are going into state coffers and not coming back through revenue sharing to city governments because our census population is only 1,800. As a result, we have crumbling roads, 80-year-old sewer and water infrastructure. We're unable to meet the basic demands of public safety in the summer months without important corners being cut. We have no housing for local jobs. Service workers all come from elsewhere, and the medium-income families are completely priced out by our high property values. The 50 square miles of South Berrien County encompassing the city of New Buffalo Township, and Chickaming Township generate an estimated $300 million a year in seasonal tourist dollars. There are 1,000 permitted short-term rentals in that area. A simple review of existing permits tells us that our STRs have an average occupancy and thereby an average residential use of 10, while according to the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission's housing study, the average residential use of a single-family home in our area is 2.2. Every short-term rental in South Berrien County has 4.5 times the public cost to our community than a standard residence. That means those 1,000 short-term rentals I mentioned have the same impact on our community as 4,500 single-family homes, which is more homes than all of the city of New Buffalo and New Buffalo Township. Obviously, I'm making the case here for the urgent need of the excise tax presented in this bill. We're at a precipice, and without the proper use taxes being levied where tourism thrives, we endanger not only our lakeshore communities, but our ability to protect our natural resources as well. I would urge you, with the utmost sincerity, to define the land use of what a short-term rental is in this bill. Recent state case law in both 2021's Cherry Homeowners Association versus Baker and 2023 Aldridge versus Sugar Spring Property Association have already determined that short-term rental use is specifically commercial. And to quote the appellate court in 2019's well-known Susan Room versus the Township of Spring Lake case, plaintiff's use of property for short-term rentals was never permitted under the township's R1 zoning. This is consistent with case law establishing that commercial or business uses of property, generally meaning uses intended to generate a profit, are inconsistent with residential uses of property. If you do not do this, every single municipality who has not yet acted to regulate short-term rental use but chooses to do so at a future point will be determining that land use in court by a judge on the burden of the taxpayer. This is not a one-size-fits-all issue. I understand that larger cities are offering, STRs are often used to house temporary workers. Communities must be individually allowed to plan this land use and zone it accordingly. This is not something that should be driven by demand of the market, or our lakeside communities all face severe risk. Local control is mandatory here. In closing, I would say that what can the state do that local units of government can't? You can define the land use and you can make us whole for 15 years of carrying the burdens of someone else's business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate your promptness here. With that, we'll dismiss you and bring forward Mark Florian, Lincoln Township trustee. Following Mr. Florian will be Jen Ringtrink from the Michigan Municipal League. And I'll say while we can transition as well, following Ms. Ringtrink will be Amy Shamrow, the Traverse City Mayor. Mr. Florian, you may begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Mark Florian. I'm a Lincoln Charter Township trustee and Planning Commission member of over 30 years. Lincoln Township is down in Berrien County along Lake Michigan. I am also a short-term rental owner of at least that period of time, and I live right next door to a short-term rental, one which I might add during the prime season of the summer, leases out, rents out, per night for $2,750. So it's a big one. I have a very unique, what I believe to be a unique perspective on this issue, and I just want to share a couple of points, the detail of which is contained within the written testimony that you've been provided. I want to go back to the excise tax for just a moment and the comment with respect to parity. Please understand that short-term rental owners pay or are obligated to pay a use tax based on their income. They have a 6% state use tax obligation. With this bill that is before you, there will be a 6% excise tax on top of that, bringing the total to 12. With the tie-barred bills that are attached to it, there will be a accommodation tax that will be applicable to those short-term rentals as well, which in the case of my community will be an additional 5%. So you've got 6 already, 6 more, and 5 on top of that puts the tax obligation at 17%, which is not in parity with hotels and motels, at least in my community. Their total tax obligation with sales and accommodation is only 11%. With respect to the purported additional expanded local control that comes with 5438, there really isn't any. At least our Planning Commission doesn't view any. We have an ordinance within Lincoln Charter Township that's worked very effectively over the years to regulate short-term rentals. We have our own database. We have rules in effect for the operation of those short-term rentals, and we have penalties in place if the owners and operators of those short-term rentals don't comply. I believe that Mr. Andrews said that he was looking to enshrine those powers that already exist. enshrine those powers or to underscore those powers. And Mr. Chairman and committee members, I submit to you that if we need another law or package of laws, in this case I believe nine of them that are tie-barred together, to underscore or enshrine a law and power that already exists, perhaps we ought to be just taking a step back and thinking about removing the ambiguity, removing the lack of clarity, removing the vagaries that exist within those current laws. Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a clarifying question?
If we can, I'd like to continue moving through testimony, and again, we'll make sure that there is time for questions potentially at the end of this session and subsequent hearings as well. So if we can just hold for a moment, that would be appreciated. So with that, I'd like to bring forward Jen Rigterink. Again, following them will be Amy Shamrow, the Traverse City Mayor, and following Mayor Shamrow will be Trevor, and I'm going to mess this up, Tkach, from the CEO of Traverse City Tourism. Ms. Ringtrink, welcome back, and thank you for your testimony. You can begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members, for this opportunity to address you. I am up here to talk about House Bill 5438 specifically and our support for that. We also would like to thank the sponsor for very intentionally engaging all the different stakeholder groups on this bill. It was a different approach than what we've seen in the past, and we are very thankful and appreciative to be at the table with other stakeholders at the same time to try and work through this policy. The number one reason that the League and a majority of our members, and if I could ask my colleague really quick to grab that card stack and run them up here to me, I completely forgot that. Support this piece of legislation is because over the years in working on this issue, the number one concern expressed is municipalities. And when I said a majority of our members, this is a small stack, I'll say, of cards that we have collected from our members. We did provide the clerk with a spreadsheet so that she didn't have to log all of these. We didn't want to burden her with that. But I did want to show the overwhelming support, and I think you'll also see in the committee record a number of our members have reached out directly to provide written testimony, knowing that being able to testify here today would be hard. But our number one reason for supporting this is the number one concern we've heard are municipalities banning short-term rentals. We believe, as the previous testifier said, there's already law clarifying that locals can't do that. But this, again, codifying that you can't prohibit and making sure that you cannot have regulations in place that have the effect of totally prohibiting or banning, outright banning short-term rentals. There is a difference between banning and regulating. I think sometimes those two are conflicted as the same thing, and they're not. Regulating a land use, while maybe you're not allowing it everywhere and completely unfettered, is still regulating. It's not banning it. So again, that number one concern that we have heard over and over again is being addressed in this bill. I've faced questions from folks about what are other states doing. Many other states have statewide registries and or are requiring short-term rental owners, in addition to the platforms, to register and be licensed at the state level. If they aren't addressing it, they're allowing the locals. And those who are addressing it are still allowing locals to have their own processes at the local level. And the question of how are other states taxing this? There are numerous states, even more than are actually doing the statewide registry, that are requiring short-term rental to pay a special tax, whether that's at the state level or, in addition, at the local level, to help address those costs. Many places, when it's a local fee or tax, are putting in those into housing funds, definitely knowing that housing is a huge issue, especially in this state. So talking housing, this approach, will it solve our housing issues in Michigan? No. But will it address and not intensify that crisis that's going on? Absolutely. Other approaches with unfettered short-term rentals, I believe, add fuel to that fire of our housing crisis, and this will not do that. In closing, we believe the time is now to act. We ask that this committee Please act quickly. Bring this bill up for a vote when it is able to, and that you support it as well. This is good policy, and we'd like to see move. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rigtrink, for your testimony. Ms. Shamrow, Mayor Shamrow, excuse me, by Zoom, you are welcome to begin your testimony when you are ready, followed by Mr. Tkach, and I'm going to keep saying it that way until I'm told otherwise, followed by Judy Allen with the Michigan Township Association. Thank you, Mayor. Go ahead.
Thank you to the committee for allowing me to make some comments today. I'll try to be as direct and to the point as I can. Just wanted to touch on this. Many points have already been raised that were excellent that apply to Traverse City as well. I cannot emphasize enough how important to me the excise tax portion of this package of bills is. Since I was elected, but also being born and raised in Traverse City my whole life, I've seen the burden that tourism, while it's an economic boom, can also put onto municipalities. As in Traverse City, for example, we see our population on any given time during our season increase by 50% any given day from our base population. And that does take its toll. It takes its toll on our roads, our sewage and water treatment, and everything else that, as was mentioned by Mayor Humphrey, is already left to the municipalities to take care of without much assistance from any other funding. So this excise tax, I think, would be a game changer, quite frankly, for municipalities like Traverse City that are 8.6 miles and 15,000 people, but literally see hundreds of thousands of people through our peak seasons, which now run from May to throughout the fall. That's a big part of our year that we are entertaining, welcoming members of our or other citizens of our state, as well as people from around the country, and we are very proud to do so. But we are talking about the toll it takes here. I also wanted to address the zoning issues that actually tie to the bans or the discussions of opening up short-term rentals that have been happening at the state level for years now. Here in Traverse City, we are already doing a lot of the regulations that are in this, would be codified in these set of bills. But we are also first bearing the responsibility for those costs for scraping tools to check on residents that might be posting legally or illegally, and some of those basic things that happen in with our small but mighty staff trying to manage them. And that has a cost, a real cost. The other thing that we are seeing in Traverse City, though, is as we introduce zoning changes in general to residential, where short-term rentals are banned in Traverse City, the constant discussions that we have heard in Lansing over the years of we may be opening up or removing any kind of regulation on short-term rentals has been a specter hanging over those discussions. So I would, seeing this again solidified in this package of bills would be also very I think calming to a lot of areas like ours that worry about something like that happening and their next door neighbor suddenly becoming a short-term rental. So I think, well, we have that regulation at our local level, solidifying it at the state level would make a huge impact on us. And lastly today, I just wanted to speak to the changes to what the CVBs would be allowed to do with their money. We have a great relationship with Traverse City Tourism. Trevor will be speaking next, but opening that up to housing, we've seen in our own area that as people have had to drive further and further to work at jobs in our tourism industry, which is so vital, that the cost of housing has pushed people further and further out, and that has created an issue of finding actual workers. And so we've seen restaurants closing down several days a week. We've seen businesses having to limit their hours. We've seen hospitality, other parts of hospitality have to limit or change their models, purely not because of demand, but because of the worker shortage. So allowing that to open up and allowing that the bureaus to become better partners with their municipal partners is going to be also game changing. So I appreciate you all bringing these bills forward, and I look forward to seeing them progress. Thank you.
Mayor Shamrow, thank you very much. I'm going to turn that volume back down. Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate your insights. With that, I would like to welcome Trevor Tkach forward, and please feel free to correct me now if that isn't correct.
Oh, Chairman, you've done a perfect
Okay.
job, and that is so uncommon. So
And again, we're going to following Trevor will be Judy Allen, and then following Ms. Allen will be Dina Bosworth with the Michigan Association of Counties. Thank you, Trevor. You can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm embarrassed that I didn't carpool with Amy down here today. We are good friends. And I didn't realize she was going to testify, so good for her for being heard today. Anyways, my name is Trevor Tkach. I am the president and CEO of Traverse City Tourism, the destination marketing organization for the Grand Traverse region. I'm actually here representing the Michigan Association of Convention and Visitors Bureaus today. I'm the immediate past chair of that group. MACVB is a group that advocates for all things good related to tourism and travel in our state. We also endeavor to educate our members, allow them to network, and of course we support all the wonderful marketing that's being done in our state and by our destinations for travel. We're made up of 51 destination marketing organizations across the state, from the biggest metropolitan areas to some of the smallest communities in our state. Destination marketing organizations are economic development organizations that are put in place to support the marketing efforts of a community. It is our jobs to promote, sell, encourage people to come and have meetings and conferences in our areas. We support our visitor centers, our websites for visitors to come and join us, and our visitor guides. We endeavor to make sure that our venues are fully occupied as often as possible to maximize the potential and make sure people are fully employed in our communities, and we invest in destination development in our communities. The funding mechanisms for these 51 destination marketing organizations is very different, and hence the fact that we're looking at a 10-bill package. 9 different public acts that exist. I will focus in on 2 of them to kind of articulate a point. Public Act 263, which was recently modified, affects 8 of the counties, larger counties in our state. It is a tax. It is collected by the county. It's a county-wide tax, and recently modified to also allow Grand Rapids to have a 2% tax as well. So the county's collected, and then we'll use those dollars for the tourism industry and dollars that will go to fund that destination marketing organization. All businesses doing the work of accommodations at any level should be taxed under that particular act. Side by side with Public Act 59, which is the most common public act in our state. It is an act that is an assessment, not a tax. And so in Traverse City, for instance, a group of hoteliers and property managers decided at some point to create this assessment district. They vote, there's a referendum. Once approved, then they can assess up to 2 to 5% from their guests, which is remitted directly back to the destination marketing organization. In Public Act 59, there is a threshold of 10 rooms. You must have 10, you are required to collect and remit if you have 10 or more rooms. So the growth of short-term rental has largely gone uncollected from by our industry. I make this point because each of the 10 or 9 public acts that exist in our state have different thresholds. Detroit has 3 different public acts. One is at 35 and one is at 80. I am certain that they created these rules for a reason. So while we support the idea of parity, each of the public acts is so unique. We would encourage that you reach out to each of these DMOs to find out why they have the caps they have. We support local control. We support the idea of the registry to keep everything fair and equitable. What we do not support is the excise tax because we feel it leans too far in the opposite direction and penalizes those doing short-term rental business. We are fighting for parity. We also do not believe the language for housing and childcare needs to be baked in to these acts. We feel it's an unfair burden put upon our industry, and currently, at least Traverse City, is engaging on those conversations without that being written in.
Mr. Tkach, that is time, and thank you so much for your testimony today. With that, we'd like to welcome forward Judy Allen. We do have a slight change. Following Ms. Allen will be Brad Ward of the Michigan Realtors Association, and following Brad Ward will be John McNamara of the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association. Ms. Allen, you can maybe begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Judy Allen, Director of Government Relations with Michigan Townships Association. And we are here today to thank you for bringing up House Bill 5438. And we do support House Bill 5438. And that is what I will speak to today. I will also try not to be redundant and adjust my testimony accordingly. So we believe this bill provides a compromise approach to this issue that's been out there for about 7 years now by providing a balance to property regulation and oversight over commercial enterprises that are in neighborhoods while continuing to allow the short-term rental properties in all communities. In addition, the bill balances the needs of permanent residents, people who want to rent their properties, and it protects neighborhoods and allows communities to balance their housing needs for residents and businesses. As both Representative Andrews and Representative Hill mentioned in their testimony, many businesses and now sections of communities have become very seasonal. We have seen some of our communities, as they refer to them, as they become dark. The whole neighborhoods have become dark because they're only utilized certain times of the year. And currently, communities regulate short-term rentals in multiple ways, depending on their size, their capacity, and the number of short-term rentals that they have in their jurisdiction. We have some that have faced challenges. One of them that was referenced earlier, Spring Lake Township, that has had an appeal for leave all the way to the Supreme Court, and that township was upheld in their short-term rental ordinances. So, I mean, the New Buffalo mayor also referenced some other cases that were out there, and again, the local units have been upheld. And as Jen Rigdrink testified from MML, the requirements in other states, there is requirements for registration, business licenses, or fees. So this is not anything that would be different than, maybe all the surrounding states or states across the country. I will say that some of the provisions are very good in terms of ensuring safety requirements and ensuring emergency contact information. We've had communities where, for example, they've had to create provisions in their ordinances because of safety aspects. One community, because it is a community that deals with a lot of sand dunes, tourists come and, they rent out homes. But what happens is residents can't get to their home. They may be parking on property that's not theirs. They have parked in areas where emergency vehicles haven't been able to get through. So that local unit put that in place. Other areas, for example, it is a residential zone. Someone owns property, does not live there, rents it out, and happens to actually be out of the country. There's no one for anyone to contact when the garbage blows all over to other neighboring properties or when there's noise issues. They go to the township, but the township has no one to contact. So the last point I really want to raise is based on some statewide surveys, residents are concerned about the effects of short-term rentals and both the pricing and availability of housing, and we think this addresses that. So I see the green book that Matt's raising. So I will just wrap this up and say in closing that this issue's been before us for, like I said, 7 years. We believe House Bill 5438 allows for improved awareness and regulatory enforcement and represents a solution to creating an equitable playing field between short-term rentals, local governments, and ensures property rights and requires statewide regulation and community oversight. And with that, I thank you and urge your support for the bill.
Thank you very much, Ms. Allen. Your promptness is appreciated. We are making up time, which may allow for questions at the end here. That is what I'm working towards, members. So with that, Brad Ward with the Michigan Realtors Association, you may come forward. Following Brad is John McNamara, Michigan Restaurant and Lodging. Following John will be Sharon Sykes with the American Hotel and Lodging Association. Thank you, Mr. Ward. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Brad Ward, Vice President of Public Policy, Legal Affairs for the Michigan Realtors. We are opposed to the bills. While our association is not opposed to registration, regulation, and taxation of short-term rentals, we strongly believe that any state solution needs to specifically protect the right to rent and define its use. House Bill 5438 creates a heavy-handed state regulation and taxation scheme without fully addressing the ability of a homeowner to short-term rent. The current bill package only provides that local ordinance cannot have the effect of banning short-term rentals. Unfortunately, this does little protect the right to rent. Compliance for a local government is simple as saying short-term rentals are allowed, they're in commercial zones. Short-term rentals are allowed, you have to file for a special use permit, or we only have a certain number of short-term rentals in town, could be as low as 1. We support zoning approach that defines short-term rentals as a residential use subject to local registration, inspection, and enforcement. The current zoning approach to restrict STRs is to define them as a commercial use solely due to the fact that an owner makes money off of them. However, the use of the property during that stay is inherently residential. People live in them for the time that they are there. The approach of defining income-producing properties as commercial uses is now bleeding over into instances where long-term rentals are being put in jeopardy in residential zones. We believe that the use needs to be addressed before tackling any state regulatory or tax scheme. Under the bills, even if your local government has been welcoming of short-term rentals, or like most communities in Michigan, completely indifferent towards them in terms of their regulation, this bill sets an unreasonably high bar that could dissuade a homeowner from even renting. The first night that you decide that you want to rent out your property as a homeowner, you must register with the state, secure $1 million liability insurance requirement, find a point of contact within 30 miles, which could mean hiring a property manager, create and post floor plans, emergency exit routes, contacts in every bedroom, carbon monoxide detectors in every bedroom, smoke alarms in every bedroom, fire extinguishers in every bedroom. And if you rent out for more than 14 days, you have to figure out how to collect and remit taxes to the state of Michigan. As was mentioned before, as drafted, the current bill package also creates a tax penalty for short-term rentals. We've heard a lot over the years that we've been involved in this discussion about tax parity between traditional lodging facilities and short-term rentals. This is actually a penalty in some instances more than 5 or 6% if you choose to operate a short-term rental or to use a short-term rental in Michigan. Lastly, let me touch on the housing price and shortage issue that has been continually raised. While you can't say that short-term rentals have zero impact on Michigan's housing crisis, I think they are used quite often as a red herring. Other areas of the state that don't have high incidences of short-term rentals are also experiencing the same affordability and availability crisis. Local government also, in many instances, needs to look in the mirror in terms of what they've done to welcome in new housing development. They still have minimum lot size requirements, height restrictions. Do they offer density bonuses? Do they still require parking requirements? It's also not unique to Michigan. These bans are across the United States of America. The severe restrictions are across the United States. And in no instance where someone has banned or severely restricted short-term rentals has affordability or availability ever been addressed. We look forward to continued conversations on these bills, but as they are written, we stand opposed. Thank you.
Mr. Ward, thank you very much for your promptness and your testimony as well. With that, I'd like to welcome John McNamara by Zoom with the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association. Again, following Mr. McNamara, Sharon Sykes with the American Hotel and Lodging Association. And following Sharon will be, I believe it's Katie Bertodato with MISTRA, Mistra. Mr. McNamara, you may begin when you're ready. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you for having me, and I apologize in advance for not being there in person. I'm in Washington, D.C. for National Restaurants Association annual fly-in. Thank you, Chairman Fitzgerald and members of the committee. My name is John McNamara. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs at the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association, and I'm here today to oppose the package as written, but here committed to trying to get something done this session on this all-important topic. I want to begin by stressing the fact that while we are the leading voice for lodging in Michigan, Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association never has and likely never will be interested in completely banning short-term rentals. We recognize the important role they play in Michigan's tourism ecosystem and understand that some people need more space and can book a short-term rental and still go out and enjoy many of the wonderful restaurants or attractions that exist across pure Michigan. I would like to thank Representative Andrews for taking on this issue and specifically like to thank him for including a statewide registry, a mechanism we believe will be critical for a fully negotiated compromise on this issue. I would also like to thank the previous speakers for acknowledging the impact this has had on affordable and workforce housing, particularly in northern Michigan. It is getting harder and harder for servers and bartenders and workforce in the hospitality industry to find something that is affordable to live in, because many of the former rental houses have been redeveloped into a short-term rental, and what was once a couple $1,000s a month rental is now a couple $1,000s a week short-term rental. According to All the Rooms, a website that provides short-term rental data across the country, there are 19,627,000 short-term rentals in Michigan. That is a 22% increase since 2023. Currently in Michigan, 9,141 short-term rentals are professionally managed, meaning that operators have 3 or more listings on a booking platform. That is a 20% increase since 2023. In total, these listings pulled in over $535 million last year. These numbers prove short-term rental is not a cottage industry. I'm here today to offer what we believe is compromise. I would agree with the previous speakers that the excise tax is a non-starter. We are all for tax parity and expanding the lodging tax to short-term rentals, which would generate approximately $27 million for the state of Michigan. It is our belief that a significant portion of this funding should go to help fund the Pure Michigan Tourism Campaign, which currently has a return of $11 for every $1 spent. As I mentioned before, we are in favor of a statewide registry, and we are in favor of locals being able to enforce reasonable zoning restrictions that allow them to protect the uniqueness of their communities and neighborhoods. However, without Pure Michigan funding, we remain opposed to this. Michigan has the opportunity to set a standard for what is a fully negotiated STR deal that incorporates parity for lodging, funding for tourism, and locals to a responsible zone. We remain committed to working with sponsors and stakeholders on a compromise. I thank you for your time. I apologize again for not being there in person, and will make myself available offline and after this for any questions or follow-up.
Mr. McNamara, thank you very much for joining us today remotely. Your absence is understood and appreciated that you could be joining us in any capacity today as well. With that, Sharon Sykes, you're welcome to come forward for your portion of the testimony. Again, following Ms. Sykes will be Katie Bertodato with Mistra, and following Katie Bertodato will be Nathan Rotman with Airbnb. Ms. Sykes, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. I want to apologize in advance for any background noise you may hear. I'm having some unexpected technology issues, but I want to thank you, Chairman Fitzgerald, and members of the committee for taking the time to hear the American Hotel and Lodging Association's testimony on House Bills 5437 through 5446. The American Hotel and Lodging Association is a national association representing all segments of the U.S. lodging industry, and we appreciate the opportunity to provide comment on this bill package, which, if enacted, would create a statewide registration system for short-term rentals and impose a statewide 6% excise tax on each short-term rental. That provides statewide oversight, yet empowers local municipalities to tailor their regulations to the unique needs and resources of each municipality. States and localities across the country are recognizing the growing challenge of short-term rentals, which create safety concerns, reduce affordable housing inventory, drive up rent prices, and displace long-term residents. Many have adopted laws and tax collection requirements to get a handle on short-term rentals. HLA seeks parity in the lodging ecosystem in the form of safety and taxation, so all lodging establishments can operate on a level playing field. Hotels go through an extensive permitting process that ensures the community knows exactly where it is at. Residents are not being notified about short-term rentals being opened in their community until it is already established. If there are issues, it is often difficult to find the responsible party who can address the concern of the community, which are essentially operating as a business. The hospitality industry acknowledges the important role that short-term rentals have in generating and sustaining tourism in our communities. As such, we appreciate that this does not impose a ban or a moratorium on short-term rentals. AHLA welcomes the opportunity to work with all stakeholders on establishing a statewide registry for localities to access and achieve parity in the form of taxation, safety, and health. Thank you for your time today.
Ms. Sykes, thank you very much for your testimony as well. With that, I'd like to welcome Katie Bertodato with Mistra, followed by Nathan Rotman with Airbnb, followed by, I'm going to prioritize persons in the room who did travel from some distance to be here, Erica Farley, the Rental Property Owners Association of Kent County. So with that, Ms. Bertodato, you may begin when you're ready. Thank you for being here. If you can hit the red button at the end of your stalk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. Thank you all for being here. I can say with all sincerity, in looking at the sheer number of bills in this package, thank you for your time and consideration in tackling a clearly complicated situation. My name again is Katie Bertodato, and I'm here today as Vice President of MISTRA, the Michigan Short-Term Rental Association. And we're here to say we would love to help. We support the idea of licensing and registration system for all short-term rentals across the state of Michigan. We believe starting there would give a better understanding of the impact of short-term rentals that they have on our economy and our local communities. We live in these communities. That's part of the beauty of short-term rentals, and we want to ensure that we have a positive impact on them. We believe in local control. Reasonable regulation ensures every corner of our state is able to regulate according to their own various needs. We don't support a triple tax on our industry. Short-term rentals are a big part of the tourism community and have a rapidly growing economic impact. To consider STRs the same as a hotel or resort and put them under the purview of the CVBs would be complicated and problematic. It's kind of like forcing the CVBs to take us on as an unwanted stepchild. For one, you'd be taxing CVB members at different rates. We'd ask that you consider parity, as Mr. Tkach said, not punishment. There's another issue in this package we can stand behind, opening up CVB revenue to be used for more than just marketing. Tourism has an impact on the infrastructure of our communities, and we have a responsibility to ensure that impact is a positive one. Across the state, we've heard for years about our housing and childcare needs. We're happy to see these issues addressed in this package. Unfortunately, MISTRA is not able to support this package of bills in its present state. We do appreciate the effort that has gone into this presentation and hope to be involved in future discussions. We have members all across our state and are aligned with the national organization Rent Responsibly, among other nonprofits. We are connected and tied into how other states are regulating and taxing short-term rentals with great success. For example, Big Sky, Montana has a tourist tax on everything: hotels, resorts, short-term rentals, restaurants, retail. Locals are exempt from this tax, and the tax stays in the community. Outer Banks, North Carolina collects 6% from hotels, resorts, and STRs, not separating those things and taxing them differently. Of that tax, 3% goes to the county and municipalities, 2% to their beach nourishment fund. They clearly value outdoor spaces as much as we do in Michigan. And 1% goes to the CVBs to continue their marketing efforts. MISTRA would love to see an approach more like these examples. Let's keep it simple as we can possibly make it, and make sure that tourism as a whole is contributing to the needs of our communities affected by it. Thank you so much.
Ms. Bertodato, thank you very much for your testimony. With that, I would like to welcome Nathan Rotman with Airbnb, who is joining us by Zoom. Following Mr. Rotman, again, is Erica Farley with the Rental Property Owners Association of Kent County. And following Ms. Farley will be Jennifer Polson with Michigan Hosts. Mr. Rotman, thank you for joining, and you may begin when you are ready.
Thank you, sir. Chair, committee members, thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Nathan. I lead Airbnb's public policy team in the U.S. Northeast. We have a long-standing partnership with the state of Michigan and municipalities across the state, including our voluntary tax agreement from 2017 and collaboration on local ordinances and host education programs with many cities. While Airbnb supports local regulation, we have grave concerns about this bill and believe it goes too far. Before I get into the specifics, I'd like to highlight some of the economic impact our hosts have in Michigan. Our Michigan hosts play a crucial role in dispersing travel throughout the state while earning important supplemental income. In 2023, travel on Airbnb, excluding other short-term rental platforms, contributed $1.2 billion to Michigan's GDP, supported nearly 16,000 jobs, and generated tax revenues of approximately $345 million. During a time of economic uncertainty, thousands of families are benefiting from home sharing. It's also worth noting a significant portion of our guests are locals from Michigan traveling within the state. They account for 50% of all reservations in the state. Of those, 51% of them stated that they would not have visited the community they stayed in had they not booked on Airbnb. This highlights the role we play in promoting local tourism and economic growth. We all know tourism is a vital component of the economy, and Airbnb is proud to be the only platform that has signed a voluntary tax collection agreement with the state. To date, this agreement has generated over $85 million in revenue for the state, with $24.5 million collected last year alone. We're also proud of having several county tax collection agreements, and our hosts have actively contributed to their communities, supporting workforce housing projects, neighborhood refurbishments, and initiatives such as Avalon Housing in Ann Arbor and the Homestretch Neighborhood Housing Corporation in Suttons Bay. We've heard a little bit about housing today, and I just want to quote Harvard Business Review recently reported that despite fears Airbnb may lead to rent increases, put simply, restricting Airbnb is not going to be an effective tool for solving housing affordability problems in many US cities. Turning to the bill specifically, Bill 5438 is bad for Michigan. While Airbnb is committed to responsible regulation and working with local authorities, the bill's provisions raise serious legal and economic concerns. First, the bill introduces a new anti-competitive short-term rental only tax, doubling the tax rate for short-term rental guests to 12%, while hotel guests would continue to enjoy a 6% rate. This increased tax burden on Michiganders will make holidays, moves, medical stays more expensive. Further, the bill creates a complex, costly, and duplicative state registration system. Many Airbnb hosts are already required to register at the local level, and this legislation would burden them with a second registration system with a second set of reporting obligations. Considering that the average or the typical Airbnb host in Michigan only shares their home approximately 41 nights per year, the proposed level of regulation and administrative burden is unprecedented and disproportionate. Additionally, it's important to note that Bill 5438 raises serious concerns regarding federal laws such as the Communications Decency Act, Stored Communications Act, and the Fourth Amendment. The bill's requirements for platforms to monitor registration status or share sensitive personal and commercial information with the state may potentially conflict with these federal laws, raising serious legal and privacy concerns. Committee members, we value the relationship we have with Michigan and its cities. We've already had very productive discussions with many of you and remain committed to working closely with the state and municipalities, and we're open to collaboration and reaffirm our dedication to responsible planning and zoning regulations. We look forward to working with you as we move forward.
Mr. Rotman, thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate you being here today and joining us. With that, we'll move on to our next bit of testimony from Erica Farley with the RPOA of Kent County, followed up by Jennifer Paulson with Michigan Hosts, and from there we will work to have some questions heard. Yes, thank you very much. Ms. Farley, you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members, for allowing me to speak today. I am going to try to make this brief, so I'm not reiterating what so many of my colleagues have already said. I am, as the chairman said, I am Erica Farley. I'm the executive director for the Rental Property Owners Association of Kent County and Michigan. We represent small property owners throughout the state of Michigan, and the majority of these people are owning short-term rental properties less than 5, the majority of them 1 or 2. So in an effort not to go through everything again, there were 3 main things that we had concerns on for HB 5438. One was the database. We were not opposed to the database. The thought that we had was for moving it from Laura over to Treasury and streamlining that process during tax collection. And then adopting the International Property Maintenance Code for all the safety measures and protocols. This is something that we encourage to be adopted throughout all the MCLs. And then, of course, as everyone else has mentioned, if that dealing with property ownership is the concern about the excise tax and how this will, in a lot of communities, this will raise this above what hotels will be charging. And especially for those small property owners, this is going to be a major issue in trying to maintain maintain the properties that they do own. But we are very thankful to the sponsor. We have spoken with him and are happy to continue to work with him. We just saw the sub this morning, so I can't speak to that specifically, but those are our main concerns today, and I want to thank the chair and committee members for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you, Ms. Farley. We appreciate your time as well. With that, I'll welcome Jennifer Polson to the front to testify, provide testimony. And in preparation for that, I will have a few moments for questions. I am going to try and sneak in one more person to testify by Zoom. That would be Jacqueline Tierway from Expedia.com. And then we'll look to have questions. And if committee members do have questions, if you can announce who that person is, or who that person or group is, before you start your question, that would be appreciated. You may begin when you're ready, Ms. Polson.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Polson. I live in Stanton, Michigan. I'm actually an individual host. I do manage a few properties. I own one, and I manage 6 for other owners locally. So my statements are a little bit different than everybody else's, just representing smaller hosts, kind of as Erica was speaking of in her presentation. So my story is basically I moved back to Michigan to be near my family, and I needed some income, so I bought a home that I could rent out. I live on the property, and then I rent out the lakefront property. So it was a way to give me income into that. And 6 out of the 7 owners that I manage for, well, myself being including in that, we all use the property from time to time during the year for our own use. I have hosted many families and friends coming back to the area to visit because they've moved away or want a vacation in the area. I've hosted people that have come for medical reasons in the area, funerals, weddings, some veteran retreats. One was actually Make-A-Wish Foundation. She chose to stay at my waterfront property, which is really neat. She wanted to just have a vacation with her family on the water. So I thought that was really neat. I love creating experiences for my guests at these properties. Safety is important to me. Doing the right thing in the community, being a good neighbor, all those things are very important to me. I'm not opposed to regulation in general, and the taxation is the bit of the issue with that. With a very high tax rate for my guests, I'm not sure how many guests I would actually have come stay with me if they might choose to go to other places to visit and have family reunions and things like that. So the fair regulation, safety issues, I of course support collecting taxes of sorts to put back into the communities. I think the issues with the short-term rentals in the homes being businesses, the issues of other businesses run out of homes isn't being addressed, and if they're not being taxed as well for other things that they're doing, it doesn't seem fair on that sense. So I don't support these package of bills in a sense, but I support the other things that I mentioned. So I thank you for your time. I'm not as eloquent as everyone else, but I'm speaking from the heart, and I appreciate your consideration. And I do want to be part of some kind of regulation so that short-term rentals can continue in this state, so that we can share our beautiful state. Thank you.
Thank you. Your testimony is very appreciated, and thank you for being here today. With that, we're going to move on to, I believe, will be our last testifier of the day, Jacqueline Tierway with Expedia.com by Zoom. You are welcome to begin when you are ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Fitzgerald and members of the committee. My name is Jacqueline Turway. I'm the Government Affairs Manager at Expedia Group, a family brand including Expedia.com, Hotels.com, and Vrbo. Expedia powers travel to, from, and within Michigan, whether that's a business traveler staying in a downtown hotel or a family catching up in a lake house booked on Vrbo. While Expedia is opposed to this package of bills as written, we understand the importance of thoughtful, balanced vacation rental policy and have supported communities around the country in developing laws that meet diverse local needs. Vacation rentals have been part of Michigan communities for generations. Cabins and lake houses play foundational economic and cultural roles in communities across the state, offering traveling families the kind of experiences that may otherwise be unavailable or unaffordable. Thoughtful regulation can be critical to maintaining a healthy vacation rental community. Empowering cities, counties, and towns across Michigan to set and enforce locally relevant vacation rental policies can help ensure communities have the local control they need to meet their unique needs. Because the regulatory priorities and enforcement mechanisms that may work for Detroit may not work for Saugatuck, Ann Arbor, or Kalamazoo. The policies proposed by House Bill 5438 would be amongst the most onerous and complex in the nation, setting unduly burdensome standards for compliance while requiring state and local governments to build and maintain expensive, complicated regulatory structures across the state. It's the state-level response to an intensely local set of issues. We respectfully ask the committee to hold further consideration of this package and look forward to working with the sponsor, members of this committee, and stakeholders on all sides of this issue to develop a workable, balanced alternative. We look forward to meeting with you virtually or in Lansing over the coming days and weeks to continue this conversation. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Ms. Turway. I appreciate your availability here and testimony today. With that, we are a few moments ahead of schedule, allowing for questions from the committee members. I do have one question over here. Representative Paquette, did you have a question? And I tried to note when your question came forward. It was one of the bill sponsors, please. Representative Andrews, would you please come forward? Or was it for Representative Hill? Mr. Paquette? Representative. Okay, perfect. Rep Andrews, thank you for joining back. Representative Paquette.
Yeah, thank you for all this and bringing this to the committee. My question comes down to, I guess, some of the testifiers on parity, tax parity. What was the hiccup there? Why is it different? Why is it going to be different? And then also, I have a lot of sympathy for the homeowner who does, rent out to earn a couple of bucks. Is it possible to have a carve out for that person who just owns their one home, doesn't have to register, anything along those lines, I guess? And why the 14 days? Like, where did that number come from? That would be my three.
I really appreciate this question because those are the three things during testimony that I was like, I really want to come back up and talk about these things. So the 14 days one is really simple. The IRS qualifies 14 days as when you're qualified as a business entity and you have to start paying business taxes to the IRS. So we wanted to lock in with that because my thought process was if we used a different number, then we're going to create confusion. And, if you're a business owner and you're like, okay, I know I have to start paying taxes at the IRS at 14 days, but then Michigan was day one, you might accidentally be not paying taxes you're supposed to pay. So we were trying to lock in with the IRS on that one. That's really the reason for the 14 days. The parity issue, I think some of the local government folks spoke to this, but to me, the issue with parity is that when you put a hotel in a community, there's a whole process that is undertaken to make sure that the parking is available. You might have to put in a red light, water and sewage to meet the needs of however many people are going to be able to occupy that hotel, electricity. All that stuff is considered at planning when the property is built. But with your average short-term rental, it's a house that was put in as a residential home that was probably built for family of four or something like that. And so all of those considerations weren't taken, and let alone the additional burdens that it puts on public safety and that sort of thing. So I actually view the excise tax as parity. I know dollar parity maybe it doesn't look like, but in terms of making up the gap on the investment that the community makes when they put in a hotel versus these STRs just being put in, it's to help backfill, the extra demands that are being put on the community to supply public safety and upgrade infrastructure as a rental's put in. So that was the thought process there. And I'll note that the overall tax burden that's created here is not out of step with surrounding states. It's actually less than if you went to like Chicago, for instance, and tried to stay there. For anybody who's done it, very expensive, lots of local taxes. And some of the other folks that testified said that it's more than other states have put in terms of like that local tax piece. But those other states have the ability for their local governments to put sales and use taxes in place. If you go to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, you pay about 1% sales tax on everything you do while you're in Gatlinburg. That's a Gatlinburg city sales tax that goes back into their city to help maintain public infrastructure. Our cities and townships are barred from putting a tax like that into place. So this is sort of like an inelegant fix to a bad Michigan tax code problem, if that makes sense. And what was the third thing? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just a way to differentiate between folks who buy up all these properties and the ones who are just like, hey, I'm gonna make some extra dollars on the side with my home.
Yeah, I'm sensitive to that too. I mean, I think we all agree that there's a difference between like the old lady who has a rental property and it's kind of part of her retirement, and like, the business enterprise that is like, 7 or 8 or, houses in a portfolio or something like that, right? Like there's some differences in that sort of thing. I mean, I'm open to the discussion for sure, and I think our local government partners are open to the discussion for sure on if there's sort of a way to make that mismatch match, because I do think there is a difference if you live in your property and you're renting it semi regularly than if this is only a short-term rental and no one's ever going to live in it. I want to note too that the conversation of housing, I think we all agree that short-term rentals aren't like the root cause of the housing crisis. But I do want to note, when MLive published their list of communities where housing prices are increasing the most rapidly in the state, New Buffalo, Union Pier, Saugatuck, Traverse City, all on that list. There's something unique about those locations, and that is the tourism industry. But in particular, St. Joe, New Buffalo, Saugatuck, South Haven, those cities, the Union Pier, where prices are going up rapidly in housing, the permanent population is also declining. So I think it's hard to say that, when you look at the supply-demand problem of housing, if housing prices are going up while the population is declining, anyway.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Hill, this is going to have to be a little bit tight and germane, and I know we have other questions, but we will work these into subsequent hearings. So, Representative Hill, who's your question for?
Not for the bill, my fellow bill sponsor, although this will be taking off her reading glasses, does note that you can find some other examples. Bless his heart. So, those opposed to the short-term rental excise tax have not proposed a solution on how to pay for the public cost of tourism. That, to me, is the fundamental question.
We can have order in the committee room, please. Thank you.
And so I heard a lot of talk of compromise and discussion and engagement, which I really encourage and support. But please, if there are not other solutions being offered on the table at this time, I can tell you that the city of Marquette is currently operating with radios in our police department that are more than 20 years old. And pretty much every community in my district, in my 4 counties in the Upper Peninsula, needs a fire truck or tens of millions of dollars of water infrastructure improvements. We have a bad tax policy in Michigan. We are here to help fix that and address that. But we are leaving money on the table and leaving tools out of the room, and we need to bring them in. So I would really urge and support, I really encourage further conversation and ask, my question is, to those of you who are against the excise tax, how are we going to support the cost of maintaining infrastructure in Michigan?
And I think we'll have to take up the answer to that. We seem to have somebody who would like to answer that. I will allow the answer from Ms. Bertadato from Mistra.
Thank you. We actually do have a proposed solution, and that proposed solution is to model after what the CVBs have done and create an assessment. Now, this assessment would be on short-term rentals alone, and it would be an assessment, not a tax, so that those funds could stay in those communities in which those funds are coming from. So we would create a 5% tax on all short-term rentals. They would not be a part of the Visitors Bureau, so we're separating those two things, which are close, but not necessarily close enough to tie together the way that we've been trying to. And it's an opportunity to kind of stop trying to fit something that just doesn't. A 5% tax based on our numbers in the Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance region, that 10-county region, would produce over $20 million annually, year over year, which could go into a revolving fund for housing, childcare, infrastructure. So there is an opportunity. We just have to, we could model it after very similarly to what the CVBs are doing. But instead of those dollars going to marketing, it could go to infrastructure support.
Thank you for your response to the representative's question. With that, I am going to need to conclude the testimony and questioning from today. I would like to just ask that Representative Bagol and Rogers, who did note that they have questions, please submit to the chair who you had a question for, so we can be sure that they are in attendance at subsequent hearings for those questions to be directed to them. And I appreciate you engaging in that way. I very much appreciate everyone's promptness and understanding in today's hearing, because we still have people who are looking to testify, but I did want to allow for time and questions this afternoon. Recognizing that there is a lot of great dialogue that I think can come out of the testimony we heard today, I look forward to engaging with the sponsor and other stakeholders to continue to carve a path forward to address many of the concerns we heard from our local partners. This is the Local Government Committee. We want to understand how we can help to improve our local communities, because we know that those are the spaces and places that make Michigan beautiful and unique. So thank you for being here, everyone. I do have one final piece of business to do today. I had a card to read in. I have a number of cards. We did have a stack presented by the Michigan Municipal lead. I did have a card wishing to speak. Mike Bozich from Granicus will take that up at a subsequent hearing. And we'll make sure that that is well in advance so that people can make sure that their schedules align. I do need a motion to excuse absent members. That motion is made by Representative Rogers. Hearing no objection, that motion carries. And with that, the House Local Government and Municipal Finance Committee is adjourned.